Okay, Algebra. Today we are going to continue our work with fractions and we're going to look at multiplying. Now, in my opinion, this is actually easier than addition or subtraction, and we'll see why in a minute here. Some general thoughts. Why, and actually this is why I think it's easier than addition or subtraction. Multiplying fractions does not require common denominators. In fact, if you give yourself common denominators and you're multiplying fractions, you're probably making more work for yourself than you really need to. But unlike adding and subtracting, we multiply both the numerator and the denominator. So remember, when we add or we subtract, we are only dealing with the numerator. We're adding the two numbers in the numerator, or we are subtracting the two numbers in the numerator, but we're keeping that denominator the same. With multiplication, we have to do both. We multiply straight across the numerator and we multiply straight across the denominator. We may need to simplify. This can happen in addition and subtraction also, but it seems to happen more in multiplication just because of the way the numbers work. So always look for ways to simplify your answer. Sometimes, if you catch it, you can simplify before multiplication, and I'll have a example of that later. And then finally, one thing to keep in mind is you could be asked to multiply a whole number by a fraction, in which case we need to represent that whole number as a fraction, and to do that we use a denominator of 1. So for example, the whole number 2 we can write as 2 over 1, because remember that a fraction bar is just division, and we know that 2 divided by 1 is 2. Okay, let's start out with an easy one here. So we're going to multiply 1/2 times 2/3. So our process is that we need to multiply straight across. So we're going to multiply the numerators, and we get 1 times 2 is 2. And then we're going to multiply the denominators. So we get 2 times 3 is equal to 6. And this is going to be our new product. Remember, product is the answer to a multiplication problem. So our product is 2/6. But now we need to look out for our simplification, and we need to ask ourselves, what is the greatest common factor of 2 and 6? What is the biggest number that can be divided out of both of these numbers? And the answer to that is 2. So if we divide 2 by 2, we get 1, and if we divide 6 by 2, we get 3, so our new fraction is 1/3. And anytime we have a 1 in the numerator, then we know that our fraction is as simple as it can be, because the greatest common factor of 1 and any number is just 1. And one other thing to note is that the product is smaller than either number. So 1/3 is obviously smaller than 2/3, but it is also smaller than 1/2. If you multiply two fractions together, two fractions that are both less than 1, like these are, I'm not talking about improper fractions, then the product, your answer, is always going to be smaller than either number. And I've got a nice visualization of why that is here. So let's stick with this same problem. We're going to multiply 1/2 times 2/3, only this time we're going to look at it more visually. So there are our ones. Each box there represents one whole. So on the left side we have our 1/2, and on the right side we have 2/3. And we are going to multiply these together, so we're going to need a new box to deal with. And we're going to put the 1/2 in here, and we're going to multiply it by the 2/3, and then wherever these two colors cross is where our actual multiplication is happening. So yellow and blue make green. So right here, notice that we have 2/6 that are our answer here. So the green is our answer. That's where the 1/2 and the 2/3 combine, and that's 2/6, which is exactly what we got before. And if we want to simplify it, what we can do is move that green bar up, and then notice that we do have 1/3 here. So we were able to simplify that to 1/3 also. So that's a visual way to look at the numbers that we just found. And you can do this for any fraction. You don't have to. It takes a lot of time. But I think that it's good to realize what's actually happening in the physical world so that fractions aren't some mysterious object. They're not just some complete mystery. We don't know why they work, but we just know that they do if we do it right. If you can look at a visualization like this, then maybe it helps you understand why these numbers work the way they do. Okay, let's practice a few just with numbers. First one, let's look at 3/5 times 2/7. Okay, we're going to multiply straight across the numerator. 3 times 2 is 6, and we are going to multiply straight across the denominator. 5 times 7 is 35, and our answer is going to be 6/35, and there is no common factors of those two numbers besides 1, so we are done there. 6/35 is our simplest answer. Let's try another one. Let's look at multiplying 4/9 times 9/4. Okay, if we multiply 4 times 3, we get 12, and then we multiply 9 times 4, we get 36. So we have 12/36, but this is definitely not in simplest form. So we don't have to take the greatest common factor out of both of them. We can do it in multiple steps, but in this case you may notice that the greatest common factor is 12, so we're going to divide both of the numerator and the denominator by 12. So 12 divided by 12 is 1, and 36 divided by 12 is 3. So our final answer is 1/3, and that's as simple as it gets. But let's look at maybe simplifying this before we multiply. And you are allowed to do that as long as you simplify a numerator with a denominator. It doesn't matter if it's in the same fraction, but it has to be a numerator and a denominator that you're factoring out of. You can't factor out of two numerators, and you can't factor out of two denominators. It has to be one of each. So let's look at this. Let's just go through the process here. So we start with 4/9 times 3/4, and we can notice that in the numerator on the left we have 4, and in the denominator on the right we have 4, and we know that we can take a 4 out of both of those numbers. So we have new fractions now. After we take a 4 out of this numerator and a 4 out of this denominator, we're left with 1/9 times 3/1. But then notice that we can simplify again, because we have a 3 in the numerator on the right, and we have a 9 in the denominator on the left, and we can take a 3 out of both of those. So let's do that, and then we're left with 1/3 times 1/1, and now we multiply straight across. 1 times 1 is 1, 3 times 1 is 3, and we end up with 1/3, which is the same number we came up over here. So if you do it correctly, it doesn't matter if you simplify after you multiply, or it doesn't matter if you simplify before you multiply. You'll get the same answer either way. And finally, let's try one more. Let's take 6 times 2/5. Okay, this one we have to realize that we can write a whole number as that number over 1, and then that allows us to multiply straight across. So 6 is the same as 6/1, and we're multiplying that by 2/5, and there's nothing that we can factor out, so let's just multiply straight across. And so 6 times 2 is 12, 1 times 5 is 5. We end up with 12/5, which if you want to leave that as an improper fraction, I'm actually totally fine with that. But if you want to put it as a mixed number to maybe realize what's happening a little bit better, then you could do that also. So we know that 5 divides into 12 2 times, and there is a remainder of 2. So that's where we get 2 2/5 as a final mixed number answer. Okay, so that's all I've got for you today. We'll do a couple more examples of this in class. Bring questions if anything I said wasn't clear, and I'll see you then.